here, so we will go ahead and get started with that. First item on the agenda, oops, I get that figured out before June, maybe. Yeah, the first item is the minutes from our February 11th meeting. Do we have any additions, deletions, corrections, or an approval?
I can move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Don't believe we have any issues from our agenda call unless any of the CFOs have anything that they remember from that they wanted to bring up today. Hearing none, we will go to new business. Today we will receive the final 3 audit plans from internal audit at KU, Wichita State, and Emporia State. And first up from KU and the Med Center, Kate Neely.
There we go. Thank you. I'm Kate Neely. I'm the Chief Audit Executive from the University of Kansas. I also have Jared Casting here with me. He's our Internal Audit Director and Deputy Chief Auditor. KU's Office of Internal Audit. Oops. There we go. KU's Office of Internal Audit provides independent, effective assurance and advisory services to the university, including all of our campuses, as well as our controlled affiliated corporations. I'll spend most of our time today talking about what we did last year, what we have coming up for the rest of calendar year 2026. But I do have some reporting and attestations that I need to make on slide 3. I'm required to make some statements to you all by our professional standards. I'll highlight first that my position in our office are able to operate independently because of my reporting within KU, as well as my reporting relationship to this committee. I do have some non-audit responsibilities in my supervision of KU's risk management program or insurance program. And because of that, we have a management plan in place that's been reviewed and approved by KU leadership, where Jared would actually act in my place should there be a real or perceived conflict that arises because of those non-audit activities. It hasn't happened yet, but we have something in place. I think it's important to note also, I don't have this written, but I attend each month KU's Institutional Executive Risk Committee meetings. It's chaired by our chancellor. And that's an opportunity for me to bring forward new risks, concerns. If I needed to escalate any high priority items, I would be able to do so. I also receive feedback from that committee on our audit plan, new and emerging risks, et cetera. So I think that further strengthens our position to do our job well and to do our job independently and objectively within the institution. I already mentioned that I'll spend time later in the presentation, or actually most of my time, on our audit plan and audit report from last year. And I also want to highlight there towards the bottom, we are well-resourced. When fully staffed, we have 8 FTE. We're currently actively recruiting to fill 1 vacancy. Last year, we executed against our calendar year 25 audit plan, but we're also able to be really responsive to emerging risks within higher ed, as well as emerging risks and concerns brought to us by leadership. I think that's a big part of the value that we can provide to the University of Kansas is we can say this is the plan as of now, but as new things come up, we're able to be agile and respond to those as needed. We were able to accommodate leadership requests, both audit activities as well as some advisory or consulting projects. And we were also able to accommodate time or build in time to do audits and investigations as needed by reports made to our institutional anonymous hotline. We also, to me, another way we can provide value is by assisting when there are external audits of the university. There were 2 legislative post audits of KU this last year. One is still wrapping up, and Jared and I spent not an insignificant amount of time assisting and facilitating those audits. helping with responses to audit requests, audit documentations, assisting with even just responding to the audits themselves. And I think that's an important role that we play and that we continue to play at the request of leadership. We also value and really prioritize continuing professional development, continuing education within our office. We're members of multiple national professional associations. We're active in local chapters of those associations, including the Institute of Internal Auditors. We host an annual training day for local and regional public sector auditors. And maybe my favorite, if I'm allowed to say this, speaking to our JHUC community, our students. So several times a year, we get invitations to speak to classes in the School of Business about audit in the public sector. And I really take a lot of joy and pride in doing that. I continue to work closely with our Chief Risk Officer at KU to manage and oversee the university's enterprise risk management program. We're in about year 4 of the current model that we have, and each year we're able to make meaningful incremental progress in furthering that program in maturity and in the way we identify and prioritize risks with feedback from our institutional risk committee, assigning risk ownership, developing management plan or mitigation plans or risk transfer plans for those risks, et cetera. I think that's a really important piece that plays quite nicely, I believe, with our audit risk assessment activities. So we have our enterprise risk assessment, and then we have our audit risk assessment that we highlight there at the bottom, a number of processes that we engage in to build our annual risk-based audit plan. Speaking of audit plan. Thanks. So you go to the next slide. Oops, other way. I don't know. Starting on page 5 and the next few slides after that, that's our 2026 audit plan. We operate on the calendar year, so these are the audits that we plan to initiate for the remainder of this year. What I think you'll see when looking at those is we have a nice balance of advisory or consulting projects like that middle project on the slide, the non-public funds review. So we will assist our KU colleagues in going through the KBOR engaged external non-public funds review. We also have then to balance that assurance activities and financial control validations like the expense reimbursement audit that you see there at the bottom. What I think you'll also find is that we have a balance of coverage across our enterprise risk management high priority risk areas. So here we have business model risks. The following page, page 6, we have operating model and compliance risks as well. You will see here on a subsequent slide that I'm not quite ready for, we do ongoing audit follow-up. And so we follow up on prior audit recommendations that we've made. But there are situations where we feel that a prior audit that's been completed is inherently high risk enough that we need to have a standalone project that we would follow up on. And one of those is the cyber maturity risk assessment. And KBOR engaged an external firm to do a cyber maturity assessment of all of the KBOR institutions. And we feel that it was important enough that we have time set aside to monitor the actions and recommendations that were a result of that project. Slide 7 is where we begin our reoccurring and ongoing audit projects. This year we will do our annual conflict of interest review. That's our audit that's required by board policy. We also manage our university financial certification. Oh, it just, okay, there we go. We also manage, like I said, our university financial certification. I already touched on some of our audit plan development and audit follow-up activities. Our 2026 plan concludes on page 8, although I will say the last 2 slides are placeholders. I already talked about being responsive to leadership requests and hotline reports. And then page 9 includes all of the projects that we completed or substantially completed in 2025, with the exception of those last two there, student billing and fleet and driver management. We initiated those projects in 2025, and just because of timing, a little bit because of the size of the audits, those did carry forward into this calendar year. That list concludes on page 10. Page 11 is our org chart, just for your reference.
What, university financial certifications, what exactly does that mean?
So that is, probably hear about them all the time in the private sector, but it's a survey, if you will, that asks certain members of KU faculty and staff to attest to adherence to policy, adherence to financial controls, that they're not aware of fraud. And it came out of an investigation we did 11 years ago, where an individual was able to take advantage of absences of controls and bypassing policy. And so we developed that with David Varanikar at the time and his role at the medical center. Jeff has been supportive of continuing that across the full university.
So it's more of a self-certification within
Mhm.
the system.
Yep.
Got
We also use it as a risk assessment. We include,
Checks and balances.
mhm. We do go through it and make sure that we don't see anything that we would necessarily disagree with. There are some exceptions that we know about that we would review for.
Yeah.
And anything disclosed in that we take into account when building our audit plan.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, I do have a question on page 10.
Mhm.
You have a footnote on the 2 that you removed from the audit plan.
Yes.
And if I read this correctly, am I assessing that you just assume, you had a resource limitation that you need to allocate, and these were viewed as not being high risk, and is that
I
a way to
would,
look at that?
yeah, I would actually say we had additional projects come up that were higher priority,
priority,
higher
yeah.
risk.
So you
And
diverted resources to tackle those and
correct.
pass on these. All right, thank you.
And if I may, these two
Yeah.
in particular too, once something is on the audit plan, we are very active and engaging with stakeholders across the university. And so we're asking questions even before we initiate the audits. And we felt that these two not only were lower risk than the new projects coming forward, but also that there was a good amount of focus in already making some changes and implementations there.
Yeah.
So it was a balance of that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I also assume that research comes with its own set of mandated financial acumen that the institutes will have to report back to the research dollars
Yeah.
that they receive anyway, so.
Yeah, and that project in particular was actually on as a consulting engagement, where we were just asked to kind of assist with maybe some better reporting. There were no concerns for that particular project of non-compliance, if you will. It was a consulting project, which again led to it being a little bit
Right.
lower. Mhm. That concludes my prepared statements. Any other questions? Answer? Very good. Thank you for your time.
How many pages is this audit report that you submit? The actual audit report? Yeah, the KU. Is it one report that spits out at the end of the year?
For what I present to you
Yes,
all?
no,
Uh,
for KU.
So we don't do, this is our only, I guess, single report. There may be a few,
So audit findings and all that, it goes into a
oh,
document.
that goes into a specific, I apologize, I misunderstood. So typically we try to stay, I would say, I'm gonna look to Jared. Probably about 10 pages and when we include, but just findings, probably more like 4 to 5 pages generally
Okay.
of what our findings are. And that includes our recommendations as well. We also include supplemental information, like process information. Sometimes the the value that we can provide is kind of documenting what a process is, for example. So we're able to provide that in an audit process or an audit report leading into then the findings.
Okay.
But we are auditors. We will always have a finding.
Yes.
Sorry to.
Flagging.
Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood your question.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Chris, you ready? We'll do Wichita State with Chris Kavanaugh now.
There's a little momentary delay, but then you'll have access. I'm hoping. There you go.
All right, very good. All right, WSU internal audit has played a steady, trusted role.
Mike.
Oh, thank you.
I could hear me. There we go. Very good. All right. That does sound different. All right. WSU Internal Audit has played a steady, trusted role in supporting Wichita State's mission for more than 5 decades. I have served as the Internal Audit Director for 35 of those years, providing auditing and consulting services to campus leadership. Our work helps departments focus on their core missions while ensuring that control, compliance, and risk management needs are effectively addressed. Through these efforts, internal audit directly or indirectly supports the university's vision, mission, and strategic plan as summarized on page 3. WSU is student-centered and innovation-driven. During my tenure, I have worked with 6 university presidents, each bringing unique perspectives and priorities to the institution. Among them, President Rick Muma has shown exceptional insight into the value of internal controls and strategic risk management. His understanding has elevated the role that internal audit can play in shaping and sustaining a healthy, accountable organizational culture. This report serves as my final submission to the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee as I will retire in June. President Muma has appointed Senior Vice President David Miller to oversee and provide administrative support in the search for my successor. We are planning overlapping appointments to aid the transition and ensure the continuity of internal audit services for the university community. A few highlights from my tenure include achieving the highest rating on a quality assurance review. WSU was the first university in Kansas to have its internal audit function complete a quality assurance review, and we earned the highest possible rating. A quality assurance review is comparable to an accreditation visit for an academic unit. I earned recognition as a certified total quality auditor, and I developed the WSU Internal Control All-Star Credential. I created the WSU Internal Control All-Star Credential course, which awards our participants a digital credential upon completion. Earning this credential demonstrates the recipient's understanding of their essential role in the university's internal control system. The course exemplifies how internal audit can positively influence organizational culture. We have now issued more than 350 internal control all-star digital credentials to colleagues across campus. President Muma was honored to be the program's first recipient, and he promptly posted his credential to his LinkedIn page. And you can scan this QR code here to learn more about the program and see the full list of recipients. And then a key component of the course is the 20-minute video titled Internal Control at Colleges and Universities, Your Essential Role. And you can scan this QR code to watch the WSU TV video on YouTube. It would be a great primer for audit committee members to learn about internal control at colleges and universities. On page 3, I've included a snippet from WSU's strategic plan as a reminder that internal audit's work, either directly or indirectly, supports the university's vision and mission. On page 4, I have a summary of our 2025 projects and our plans for 2026. So you can see we make our way across campus. I've helped athletics, KMUW FM radio, the Business School Center for Management Development, review of disbursements from controlled funds, help the foundation review their and update their cash disbursements policy. I participated in 5 enterprise risk management working groups. Speech language hearing clinic needed some consulting help. I helped the controller's office with the state of Kansas internal controls agency self-assessment. Monitor conflict of interest reporting for the president's executive team and the affiliates. And I administer the WSU internal control all-star credential. In 2026, athletics needs some interim help because they're currently operating without a CFO. Continue, credential administration, support the internal audit director, search committee is needed, work on the 2026 enterprise risk management. I need to update some internal audit procedures for the incoming audit director. And then next summer and fall, we'll continue our work with athletics. Now, this is just a synopsis. On page 5, if you're interested in any more information and a little more detail about any of those projects, I have our internal audit impact report, where I discuss, give you a little more background information and how our impact on those areas. For example, with athletics, each year I support the Athletic Association in fulfilling its financial reporting obligations by working closely with its accounting staff and external auditors. These obligations encompass the annual financial statement audit, the Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act report, the NCAA mandated agreed upon procedures report, and the NCAA financial report. While my involvement helps reduce audit fees, the greater value is the insight it provides into the Athletic Association's financial operations. This proved especially important this past year when the CFO unexpectedly resigned shortly before the NCAA financial report deadline. Because I was familiar with the reporting processes and underlying financial systems, I was able to step in and help ensure the Athletic Association met its reporting requirements without interruption. Failure to meet the financial reporting deadline would violate an NCAA constitutional requirement, thereby increasing compliance risk. Collaborating with the Athletics Association accounting team and external auditors is a crucial annual task that takes place in the summer and fall. I will be working with the new internal audit director to ensure this vital partnership continues. Would you like to go through each one, or do you have questions about any of the specific projects?
Anybody have any? Good, I think. we're
Okay,
good.
all right, let's go to the last page then.
Guess a good question would have been, did you have any concerns in any of them?
Oh, they always need a little help.
Like Kate said, you're gonna find some.
There's always but we're dedicated to continuous improvement, and everybody buys into that. All right, closing remarks. All right. In recent years, the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee has shown a continued interest in ensuring that the internal audit functions across state universities are appropriately resourced. At Wichita State, internal audit has operated as a one-person unit for the past decade following the elimination of the assistant auditor position due to budget constraints. With this heightened interest in audit resources, and despite ongoing fiscal pressures, President Muma has affirmed that a university of WSU's size and research complexity requires more than one internal auditor to provide effective oversight. Accordingly, WSU is proceeding with plans to fill the internal audit director position and to allocate the funding necessary for the new director to hire a second internal auditor. Reestablishing a 2-person audit team will strengthen internal audit's capacity for long-term planning, strategic risk assessment, and more comprehensive audit coverage. In the remaining months leading to my retirement, my primary focus will be on these areas. After a successful period of organic growth driven by publicity and referrals, the internal control all-star credential has gained strong traction across the university. President Muma wants the course to be mandatory for all budget officers. We are currently working to make this happen. I also plan to work with the Athletic Association's accounting team to ensure it is adequately prepared for its next audit, particularly given that the Athletic Association is currently without a full-time CFO. The Athletic Association also needs help implementing new NCAA financial reporting requirements. I will then update procedures documentation to serve as an ongoing resource and support the transition to new audit leadership. With my upcoming retirement in June, WSU Internal Audit will soon begin a new chapter. The university is using this moment to strengthen its internal audit function and enhance its audit coverage for the years ahead.
Chris, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate your report today and congratulations on your 35 years of dedication and service to Wichita State. Kind of tough being a one-man band. Yeah, so we thank you very much for that.
I appreciate that.
Effort you've
I
put.
appreciate that. It went by in a flash, that's for sure. Okay.
Yeah, I guess with that, David, and the remarks on the, looking at the audit, how's the search going since,
Yeah.
June 30th will be here quickly?
Yeah, I would tell you thank you, Wesley. I would tell you we're actually struggling a little bit. One of the requirements for the position as it's currently advertised is to either have a CPA certification or a certified internal audit certification. And so far, we haven't received any qualified applicants that meet those requirements. We're going to give it just a little bit more time, and then we might look at reducing those requirements in which we would have the expectation that they would receive an internal audit certification within a certain amount of time. But right now, we are struggling with getting qualified applicants. And like Chris mentioned regarding the intent to hire an additional internal auditor, we are staging this so that we can, whoever Chris's replacement is, we want to make sure they're able to choose their team. And so we are staging this so that hopefully we can fill Chris's position and then we'd be filling that second position. But you'll hear in my presentation that, for Wichita State, we are looking at doing budget cuts. You may already know that for the next fiscal year. But adding this position in, it's already included in our budget model, and it's not something that we won't be pursuing. So.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions by either of the regions?
I am staying until that new person is here.
Okay,
June is the goal.
okay.
May get extended.
Thank you
A
for that.
year or two, not a problem.
Perfect. Chris, thank you. With that, Tammy, you ready? Tammy Norman, Emporia State.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm truly here to help. I took the job description from WSU and sent it to the Wichita Institute of Internal Audit Group, and they'll be posting it. So hopefully you'll get some really good candidates. And I'll tell all of my class people. So this is the annual report. So I want to go back. Now I want to go front. Okay, mission is to enhance and protect our organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance advice and insight. And my vision is to mitigate risk whenever I see it and ensure efficient and appropriate processes across the universe. Required reporting. These 6 things are required to report to you. Our charter is up to date. I'm independent thanks to the direct reporting to the university president and to you as the Fiscal Affairs and Audit Committee. Plan progress is in this presentation. Resources, we always want more, but they're adequate right now. Conformance with the code, we were conformed in all areas. The risk response of the management and senior leadership that I work with is very acceptable. It shows you kind of visually how we're placed. Internal audit is placed next to with general counsel. And it's important to put your internal auditor with someone who has a good view of the entire organization. And at the time I was placed with general counsel, it was the right view. Projects in 2025, cybersecurity ate up 6 to 7 months of the first part of the year. I had a grad assistant at the time who was very brilliant in cybersecurity and has published several papers and is going to go and get his doctorate. And so I took advantage of that. And we took some very intense training with the Institute of Internal Auditors so that we could collaborate with Reuben Brown when they did the maturity assessment. So they were done in May, published their findings to you in June, and my internal audit report came out in the first part of August. And we had five additional findings and 7 observations that are being worked in concert with the Reuben Brown assessment. So, right after that, I completed a MIAA project, and we completed that. We had to cancel the next 3, the Clery reporting, the financial aid, and the wellness center, because we were overcome by events that I'll show you on the next page. The conflict of interest review is still in work, but it'll be done by, I have all the data, it'll be done by the end of the month. And monitoring and managing the hotline is ongoing. Additions to the plan were the state of Kansas internal control self-assessment was completed, consulted on some CPI compliance at the university, assisted in the LPA audit of real properties. I worked with the CFO of the foundation, provided all the information, monitored it, attended that brief out, and also did a signature block review to make sure that our university was in compliance to the requests and regulations that came through for everyone to have an appropriate signature block. Then I have an attorney-client privilege work that is still ongoing, and an I-9 and H-1B audit is ongoing. So that's what's going on at this time. Meanwhile, I managed our grad assistant till May. He left in May, the one that I worked cybersecurity with. I'm an adjunct for the School of Business at the undergraduate level in spring and fall. I'm an adjunct at the grad school, and I teach advanced auditing to get auditors ready to pass the CPA exam, the auditing portion. In the summer, I teach a fraud examination class that's been growing and growing. And just for fun, I decided to count how many students that I affected their lives this last year. And it was 144, with one of them getting a job with the U.S. Treasury Department as an auditor. So, and I have some repeat. Our school is very student focused, and I am very serious about working with my students to help place them in audit positions and to further their education. Most of them don't know what audit is all about. I've served as facilitator to the ERM task force. I work with the disclosure committee, and I attend executive leadership meetings. So what's on the slate for 2026 is to finish up the conflict of interest review, the attorney-client privilege project, the I-9 and H-1B, And then I believe it'll be almost summertime. And so I met for the first time with our new president, Dr. Matt Baker, yesterday. And we talked about the university-wide risk assessment that I'm going to conduct in the third quarter. So that we really get a good handle on going forward, what our risks are that are auditable. Okay, they have to be auditable risks because some of them I can't handle. And then the hotline all year long. Any questions?
Any questions for Tammy?
I have one. Which part of your audit would be the financial aspect of auditing? Like auditing Emporia University financials?
The affiliated corporations is financial. Okay, it's called conflict of interest. It's looking at their 990s. That's required by K-Board to look at. That's financial. Not too many other financial, because the world of internal audit isn't just financial.
Of course.
You know, it's compliance and operational and IT. So I work with external auditors when they come in. Yesterday was interviewed by Mike Lowry of AGH on the ALCO, for that was a financial audit. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Hearing no further questions, Tammy, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation.
You're welcome.
Anything else on any of the internal audit plans? If not, Kate, Chris, Tammy, thank you very much for your time, your presentation, and your work at the universities. Yeah, next we will move on to the review of the state universities' annual financial reports. The next three universities led off by Ethan Erickson, Kansas State University.
Regent Dicus, did you schedule me first because you knew you were going to ask all the questions anyway?
It's always
No.
designed that way.
If you notice, I've been saving them up. I didn't ask any
Okay.
questions.
Oh, this is going to go great.
I would like you to know, I like scheduled you.
And sincere apologies. I don't know if Elaine's pulling up the right version, and we did just find a error that we were going to correct on the slide. So apologies about that. Thanks, Elaine. Well, good morning. Thank you for letting me present today and talk a little bit. I'm going to kind of breeze through some of the standard information we present and really want to focus a lot of the time and conversation on our efforts around budget transformation at the institution. It's a major initiative that we're talking about. We've been talking about it since last fall, but we're really focusing and building that engagement across campus. So I've got some slides in the back to talk about that. But some of the other key areas that we're also working on at the institution is really administrative efficiencies and kind of framing it around operational excellence or continuous improvement. So we've had a successful implementation of a unified time and leave system. We went live last October. That's for the institution. That allowed us, we moved from, I think, 7 or 8 separate systems that recorded time and leave across the university down to one. And so a huge accomplishment for the HR team and the payroll team to pull that off. And we're also continuing to make improvements in that system. We've also consolidated and moved towards a single unified staff evaluation system. And so we had a variety of ways that we evaluated staff positions across the institution. And so we've made a unified effort. We're now moving to put that all into an electronic system. So we're starting into some more modernization of a lot of our administrative processes to make sure that we're efficient as possible. Last one is that we're getting ready to, and that's also part of budget transformation, is putting in a standardized procurement platform. We've not had one at the university. So think of it as sort of an Amazon marketplace. We're going to put in a system called Unimarket that will allow us to corral and direct university spend into a central location. And we'd have about 25 to 30 different common vendors there. That enables us to capture better data about what are we buying at the university, and then take that data and work to leverage to improve our contract pricing. So really leveraging our buying power and negotiating new types of contracts at the institution. So we're really excited about some of these key administrative efficiencies, or at least I am, about that we're putting into the university. Just a little bit about our structure. We have a presence in all 105 counties. So I know sometimes we tend to think of Manhattan only as the purple bubble, but really the whole state. We have purple across. I'm looking at my friend Jeff. And so we have 3 physical campuses, Manhattan, Olathe, and Salina. We do have that extension presence all across the state. And then we have 5 controlled affiliated corporations and 5 non-controlled affiliated corporations. In terms of some current conditions, just to give you a bit of a highlight of where we're at, we have seen some steady enrollment after several years of declines that we'll kind of show here in a second. Our CFI score continues to stay healthy. We did recently get an upgraded rating from S&P from A positive to AA negative, so it was a strong increase. And I highlight that in terms of from an industry perspective and all that's happening in higher ed in general. We feel pretty proud that we were able to secure that upgraded rating. We are close to completing our Ag Innovation Initiative, which was 5 separate buildings on our campus. 1 new one, 2 new ones, several renovated facilities. Total project cost about $210 million. All the facilities should be complete and ready and open this fall. We'll have ice cream again, so everybody's really excited about having that back on campus. And then we've had some real strong success recently in federal and state appropriation support. So related to that $210 million project, we did receive some support from the federal government to help with the construction of that. We were authorized bonding authority to construct really a state asset for a new veterinary diagnostic lab. We're starting in that process as well. And then one that's currently under consideration and the legislature is potential for $45 million for construction of a new dairy plant at the university. So lots of good support then and growth at the university. Here's a quick snapshot by FTE in terms of our enrollment growth over time. This would be for all of our campuses, Manhattan, Olathe, Salina, and our veterinary medicine, all rolled up into one. You're seeing, our bottom line, bottom of our dip really was fall 22, and then we've seen some steady progress over time and growth. And so that's been a huge amount of effort by our enrollment management teams to really work on our proposition statement out to students to attract and retain those students as well. Here's just a similar look, just a different way in terms of our credit hour production. Starting to see that tick up in between, breaking it down between face-to-face and online. Obviously, we're coming out of this time next year, you probably won't see the 2020, 2021 snapshot, really that last year of the pandemic, where a lot of our coursework was offered online clearly, and then we've kind of transitioned back to that normal cadence. Here's a quick snapshot of our resident tuition and fees. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Are those numbers really right? That doesn't make any sense that face-to-face was higher in 21, 22. Is that just coming back from COVID?
I think that was just coming back from COVID. Yeah. Yep.
It's that we needed to see each other.
Yeah.
Look every done.
Funny. Here's a quick snapshot of our resident tuition and fees pricing in comparison to our peer and aspirant institutions. So really staying within that middle quadrant there. trying to, and just reiterating our commitment and continual conversation that we have internally with our students as we think about total cost of attendance, trying to keep that student affordability, which is obviously part of our land grant access mission that we have. And so continue to work hard to try to keep that cost of attendance as low as possible.
Ethan, from the fall of 2023 to 25, we got a pretty significant high. Do we know what kind of students we are attracting? Like what kind, what demographics, or are we attracting a particular segment of students?
So it's a variety of,
Okay.
not just one, but a variety of areas that we've seen success in. But one of the chief areas that we've seen is we implemented a new non-resident pricing structure a couple of years ago. And what that provides is, based on the student's academic merit, they can receive a different tier of discount from that non-resident tuition rate. And so if you are that highest academic, you actually would qualify for the in-state rate. So that's really seen an increase in our non-resident enrollment, which you can kind of see there a little bit in those tables. So that's really a big piece of why that's kind of grown. But we have also increased our in-state share as well.
Did the no fee days, did that help at all? Do you know?
I think it certainly helps provide an opportunity for students that maybe wouldn't have normally applied or wouldn't think of applying. That's one of the pieces there. And I think we have seen some success. The challenge in some ways, though, is you might get a lot of students that apply that really have no interest. But from a marketing and enrollment management standpoint, we're continuing to put resources into those applications. And so there's a bit of a give and take on those pre-enrollment days, pre-application days. Here's just a quick snapshot of our general use budget update. Again, just a reminder, this is as of December 31st. The state general fund lines, those first three lines, that's a reflection of state dollars spent year to date. Versus the tuition lines, that's truly tuition revenue collected by the institution by that date. And so really, I don't see necessarily any particular areas of concern. We're tracking right along where we would expect. The caveat would be in terms of the vet med line item, you'll see it's spent about 83%. That's really a function of how they manage the general use budget. They tend to spend the state dollars first and then shift to the tuition dollars that they collect later on. So that's why you see that spike a little bit more on that particular line item. Here's a quick snapshot of how our budget spend is by type of activity, whether it's instruction or research. Again, that mid-year snapshot, everything's looking kind of what we would expect. A couple areas I'd point out, that debt service line item, you'll see that's only 11%. That's also a function of how our debt service spend is scheduled. So in the fall, which is what's only picked up here, it's an interest-only payment. In the spring, then we have principal and interest. And so you would see us then match out and spend that full $8.5 million. Capital improvements, that's actually a function of some of the older capital renewal dollars. So not Restoration Act, but dollars that we've received in prior years, that from a construction spend cycle, we're starting to catch up and spend those dollars. So we're a little ahead of schedule on that. But that's, again, just a function of us and our construction cycles catching up finally with the dollars that we were appropriated. Some of that is even inclusive of demolition dollars that we've received from the board. Here's a snapshot from a financial report view over time from 2021 to 2025, really just demonstrating how our spend has changed. In our particular areas. A couple that I might make note of, that institutional support category, you're going to see that jump from about 38 to 60 million. Some of that is the activities within there is our significant investment we started making a couple of years ago around cybersecurity and IT infrastructure. So we invested a significant amount of dollars into that. We've also continued to invest dollars in some of those standardized systems that we've implemented at the institution, so Concur and our time and leave system. The other one that you'll notice that is a decrease actually is that scholarships and fellowships, but that you'll see it go from in 24, 44 million to 21, but that's a function of an accounting rule change. And so really it moved it from an expense to a negative revenue. Since you're only seeing the expenses on here, that's why it drops. We're spending about the same amount. It's just a different way of accounting for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where does this number go?
In
And like the 977?
Yeah.
And is that continued growth when you look over this 5-year period of time sustainable? When you look at, what we're dealing with?
I think so. And I say that because one of our key fundamental principles that we always have at the institution is a balanced budget. And so we're always making sure that whatever growth that we're showing is truly a balanced expenditure. You might start to see some areas where expense is increased because we're spending some of our cash balances. But I don't see a concern that level of spend wouldn't continue. Obviously, if we have significant enrollment declines or the federal research environment changes or the state cuts our budget, those are going to be the factors that really feed into whether, that level of spend can continue. Here's a different snapshot. So instead of by activity, really, what are we spending our dollars on? And you're going to see this really across the board for all of our institutions. The biggest category of spend that we have is on our people. And so here in between compensation and benefits, about 60% of our spend is really on our faculty, staff, and student employees. And so that takes up a big chunk of our budget. And then you follow that with just what it takes to operate an institution.
The interest rate expenses, the loans or line that you from.
That'd be our debt. Yep.
Good. And do we get the same debt that the private get, or do we get anything better?
Well, we would get the public
Okay.
tax exempt rate typically, and some of it would depend on what's the use of the facility. So if you have some taxable activity, you'd want to issue debt that a proportion of that debt is taxable versus non-tax. And we've got the debt expert right behind us. That hopefully I'm saying that all right. Okay, that doesn't give me much hope that I got that one right. Jeez, thanks, Jim.
Remember that one for the next agenda, the next. Agenda.
You guys can save questions for Jeff. I mean, okay, thanks. Just want to give a snapshot going back to about 2009 in terms of what's our funding mix been for our general use budget. And so this is really a look at, adjusted for inflation, our state dollars that have come in to support the university, as well as our tuition dollars. And you see then as the state dollars have declined over time, we've had to then rely more on tuition. But you also see that beginning in about 2017, 2018, from a budget view, we started recognizing that, okay, we have enrollment declines and they are going to continue. And so that really led to about a 10-year period where we were adjusting our budget almost annually to recognize that we've reduced enrollment and tuition revenue. In total, we've pulled out about at one point we had pulled out about $75 million of tuition revenue and constricted our operations then accordingly. We're starting to see a bit of a tick up then obviously in tuition revenue growth with our enrollment growth. And then we've also seen a little bit more support obviously from the state. This is a view that excludes any of our special allocations. So we get funds for our global food system, our biomanufacturing. This is really just our pure operating budget that we look at.
Because the expense itself is 977 million, so that doesn't match up with.
Yeah, that's just the GU.
Yeah.
The other one, the 977, is an all funds picture. So all of our other resources that we get at the institution.
This graph should be published online.
Yeah. Just a quick snapshot of our debt portfolio. You'll notice, and we'll talk a little bit about it in terms of our debt burden ratio. We've kept our overall portfolio pretty modest over time. Even though we've had some issuances the last couple of years, as we, every year we pay off a certain amount of principal. So even if we've had some smaller issuances, which we had in 25 and then again in 26, you'll see then that our overall portfolio stays pretty modest. The key factor that we look at then, the university debt burden, goal is to stay below 7%. So in FY25, again, as a function of the calculation, we had a slight decrease, even though we had a housing issuance for 25 million. That was for the strong complex renovation and our honors housing renovation. We also had a separate issuance, really though it came under the Kansas Department of Administration for our K Aries facility in Salina. So it doesn't count against us in our calculations. And then in FY26, one of the items up on the consent agenda is issuance of that Ag Innovation Initiative debt that we were authorized a couple of years ago. That debt really is meant to aid us in cash flow management for the project. Several of our receipts, probably 20 million of our receipts sit outside of our construction window. And so we've got to obviously issue debt in order to maintain that cash flow and pay those construction bills. Our CFI went, we had an increase 4.97 to 5.9. Just a reminder, sort of the things that really play into that calculation are cash, any investments, changes in our debt levels, revenue stream fluctuations, how our endowment is looking. I think the key story here really that I'm especially proud of at the institution is over time, and I like this view because it gives you a context of what's that score really mean in terms of a relative scale. Since 2016, we've moved from 2.4 to that 5.9 scale for FY25. We've done that, so we've really strengthened our financial position as an institution, despite enrollment declines that I mentioned earlier, despite a pandemic, despite a cyber incident. We've had a lot of significant events at the institution, but we've continued to work hard to secure our and strengthen our financial position. A lot of that's related to, again, keeping our debt portfolio modest, keeping a balanced budget, really monitoring our cash. And so I feel pretty proud that we've made a pretty healthy improvement on that score.
Well done.
Thank you. So really want to spend a little more time on what's on the horizon and the budget transformation effort that we have. We've spent a lot of time this fall really thinking about what are our core financial objectives at the university. What do we want to hold dear? What do we want to invest in? How do we want to advance the institution? And so really first and foremost is going to be our people. We are close to finalizing a market study and understanding what it's going to take to pay our people at market. So we know we need to invest there. We want to make sure our budget practices are aligning our resources to advance our next gen goals. Again, continuing that student affordability lens. So we're wanting to make sure that as we go through the years and understand what we need to invest in, keeping student affordability as a top priority. We don't want to lose ground on that financial stability that we've talked about. We want to make sure we preserve that, but know that we need to invest in certain areas. And then technology and facility investment, also key objectives for us into the future. So when we look ahead at all of those objectives and the things that we know we need to invest in the next 3 to 5 years, we're looking at probably close over $100 million in annual recurring costs coming online to the institution. We also know that we have a one-time investment need of about $75 million that it's going to come. So when you look across those key categories, what we have are, because of the demographic cliff, we know we need to invest in our enrollment and student success teams so that we continue to grow that enrollment funnel and that portfolio, even though we're going to have a slightly smaller market that we'll all be working in. We know that there are some research funding implications happening right now. Last tally I had was about, we're down about 25% and awards, federal research awards. So with that comes a significant decline in the research overhead dollars that come into the institution to support that infrastructure. So we know we need to find a way to fix that. Market pay, at this point, we're estimating about a $66 million needed investment in that area across our faculty, staff, and graduate student cohorts. Aging technology, that really is referencing our core enterprise systems, so our finance, our accounting, and our student systems. I made the joke, it's probably not a great joke, but our finance system turns 21 this year, so it can drink. And it also came out 2 years before the iPhone. So if that gives you a sense of how much technology is advanced, but we've not been able to keep up with it because of our antiquated systems. So we've kicked this can down the road. We know we need to fix it. And so we know we're going to invest around $75 million for the replacement of all three of those systems. We obviously have the K-Board deferred maintenance assessment needs. Right now, what we're estimating, if the 2% maintenance assessment stands, that would mean that we would need to invest about $53 million a year into our infrastructure based on that 2% of current replacement value. When you think about the Educational Building Fund that we have dollars available and our Restoration Act dollars, that takes that $53 million on an annual basis down to about $17 million that we need to find and continue to invest based on the K-Board policy. And then we also all recognize there's a new era of athletics. The world has changed since what it used to be. And so recognizing the critical critical role athletics plays in K-State, our success, everything that we do as an institution, our ability to recruit and retain students, athletics plays a key role. So many of you are familiar, there's the revenue share requirement that has gone into place, 20-some million that will ramp up each year. We felt it was appropriate as an institution to provide about $4.2 million annually and to provide that support, but for scholarships of student athletes. The way we kind of got to that was looking at the economic impact of K-State as a whole, and what does that bring to the state of Kansas, and then what is that proportional share of athletics to that economic impact. So you do the math, works out to about $4.2 million. That was sort of the logic that we got to how much we want to support. Athletics then is, in order to fulfill the rest of that $20 million, is looking across the board in a variety of ways. One of the key ones is philanthropic support. And so they're continuing to, all year long, they've been out there securing pledges to help meet that revenue share commitment. And then we obviously have a lot of other impacts to us every year as we think about our financial future. What will the state do? What will the federal government do? What's the inflationary impact that's going to have on us as an institution? So knowing all of those financial pressures that we have in coming into the future, we've put together what we're calling a budget transformation effort, looking at trying to develop some new ways of allocating our resources, but also looking at how do we activate our resources a little differently. Some of these ideas aren't necessarily novel, but they're very new to K-State. And it really is changing the way we're thinking about how we've traditionally managed our resources. So you're going to see things in the boxes there, the newer levers in terms of how are we going to distribute future enrollment growth dollars? How would we distribute future tuition rate revenue dollars that would come into the institution? Still wanting to align those dollars in a way that incentivizes colleges, especially in those two categories, to continue to grow our enrollment, continue to grow our research efforts, some of those key next-gen priorities that we have, finding a way to allocate those on a metric basis out to our colleges. We want to look at how we're managing our cash as an institution right now. If a unit doesn't spend everything that they've been budgeted, they get to continue to keep all those leftover dollars. We're going to change that. We're going to pull some of those dollars back more centrally, still keep some flexibility out to the colleges and units with those dollars, but we're going to pull more centrally in order to invest into those financial pressures that we just talked about. Another big one that we're talking about is an operational support fee on some of our select special revenues. So that would be Regent Parasker, you mentioned the 977 versus the 400. That would be the other roughly, 600 million that we'd be looking at. What would be a support fee that we would assess on those revenues as they come in? Traditionally, those have never been assessed anything, yet the activities generated by those dollars that come in utilize all of our core ERP systems and to make those activities happen. And so we're going to transition into a way that would look at assessing the fee on those dollars. Just to be explicitly transparent, that would also include dollars that are coming in from student service fee dollars that are collected, college fees dollars that are collected, but it's also on ice cream sales and livestock sales and all those pieces. Those are activities that are generating dollars and utilizing that core infrastructure. That's where that fee would go back to, is to help fund that enterprise replacement. With all of that said, even with the new levers that we're wanting to deploy, we still are anticipating about a 1.1% budget reduction each year for the next 3 years in order to invest back into our faculty, staff, and students. And so that's where the revenue generated from that budget cut would go back into funding our compensation study. So I hit you with a lot. Sorry about that. We spent about 45 minutes, the provost and I did, talking about this recently in the campus town hall. So they got a lot more detailed version of all of this. And with that, take any questions?
Ethan, what do you see as the greatest obstacle for your success with this new budget plan?
So some of it's, again, I mentioned change, right? Change is always hard. And working through, these concepts and then taking it down to an operational level and understanding it's going to impact a lot of different units in different ways. And so continuing to make progress on that. Enrollment growth would be a tough one. And then I think whatever happens at the state level as well, as if the state reduces our budget significantly, that would impact us in that plan.
That's what keeps you up at night.
That does keep me up at night. But I think the key thing though is we've identified our objectives, and we have been very clear to campus and everybody that things are going to change in the future. We might have reductions, anything could happen to us, but we're going to stay the course on investing in these key areas. So we might have to change our levers quite a bit. You never know.
I know you keep getting these questions, but
No, you're fine.
this is for general, CFOs as well. As you're working through these processes, really going into the roots of changing some systems that, you've been using for 21 years, are you considering the benefits of AI playing into this, right? How the expense can reduce eventually by using these systems.
So Concur, and Fran's on the line. Concur is actually a one that's is rolling out some AI tools as it thinks about taking in receipts, using that AI to read that receipt and then autofill some of the forms in the Concur system. So yes, we're looking at how AI can play into it. Some of it depends on what's the AI technology each of those software systems is bringing online as well.
We can also do use case within the university and pick up a use case and then go through what's the regular process look like and what's the expense, and then how can we induce AI tools to reduce the expenses.
Yeah, and I would assume when we begin our ERP journey, that's probably about a 4 or 5 year journey that we would be on. And so we'll be rebuilding a lot of our internal processes and looking at it from that lens too.
Okay.
I think you only asked like 1 or 2 questions, Regent Dicus.
Yeah, on my best behavior.
He's slipping.
Okay, is that how it works? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Ethan, thank you very much. David, you ready?
All right, good morning, Regents. I was really concerned that I made a grave mistake in preparing my presentation because I had 19 slides, and then I asked Elaine how long to plan for the presentation, and she said 8 to 10 minutes. But Ethan just took about 30 minutes for his presentation. So I'm going to power through this relatively quickly as much as I can. But if I gloss over something, please stop me, and I'm happy to try and answer it. Listening to Ethan's presentation, though, one thing that struck me is there's a lot of slides here that are going to be very similar to what you saw in K-State, and the story is very similar. There's also going to be slides that are going to tell a different story about Wichita State compared to K-State and KU. And those are the ones I'll try and concentrate on a little bit more as we go through this. Sorry. There we go. So some of the highlights that you'll see in today's presentation. First, Wichita State reached its highest head count on record at 18,458 students in the fall. Enrollment in both the Shocker City and Shocker Select tuition discount programs continue to grow at a healthy clip, and we're very happy to see that. One of the things that's really important about the identity of Wichita State is a large portion of our degree-seeking students are first-generation students. And that's remained strong at almost 50% of our degree-seeking students, which I think is pretty amazing. Similar to national trends, we have experienced pretty significant declines in our international enrollment. If you go back to fall of 2022, our international students made up about 15% of our degree-seeking students. Today, here in the fall, they make up about 8%. And our expectation is that is going to continue to decline. In the budget for this year, the decline in international enrollment totaled, our projections were $5.7 million. And you'll see in the next slide that we've done a pretty good job in estimating that when we were putting the budget together a year ago. Our liquidity position continues to improve. We still have a lot of work to do in that in relation to that, but I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then finally, President Muma, in a lot of his speeches, he often references that you've been living under a rock if you haven't noticed how our campus is changing and changing over the last 10 years. And the three large projects that we have going on right now are currently on time and on budget. So. Looking at our general use budget as of December 31st, as you look at our SGF appropriations, the first, I think, 6 or 7 lines there on the table, they all align with my expectations and in relation to the type of appropriation that's been awarded by the state. So there aren't any surprises there. Below that, at the bottom, right above the total revenue budget, is our tuition. And you can see as of mid-year, we collected $50 million or about 51.4% of the budget. So again, that's really refreshing for me to know that in our projections and expectations related to the declines in international enrollment, right now we feel like we created that budget and we're right on target with what those expectations were. Towards the bottom, as you look at our total expenditures, we're currently a little bit higher than 50%. We're at a total of 55% of the budget. I'd tell you, though, that that's not unusual for Wichita State. We often pay a lot of our service contracts as well as our software contracts at the beginning of the fiscal year, as well as some of the research appropriations from the state are often spent out early. And so that's not abnormal for us. Here you have an outline of the mix of different revenues that go into our finances. And just to call a few out here, state appropriations make up 17% of our finances, tuition and fees only 13%, and then grants and contracts 45%. A story I like to tell here, because I came to the university right as the innovation campus was kicking off around 2015. And I think it's a great comparison of the change in both the finances of the university as well as the structure of the university. You know, back in 2015, we did about $50 million of total research. Here in the previous year, we're looking at $475 million in total research. And so that grants and contracts used to be only 16% of our finances. And as a result also of that kind of structure and the lack of diversity in our revenue sources, state appropriations made up 26% of the budget. And if you were to combine tuition fees and state appropriations back in 2015, that made up almost 60% of our budget. Today it's 30%. And so our revenue mix is much more diverse, and I think that is a strength for us as an institution going forward.
But with the current situation, do you see any cause of concerns as well?
In the sense of federal funding and definitely concerns, yes. But I would say that one of the strengths for us is that a lot of our research is concentrated on the Department of Defense side.
War.
And that gives us, I think, some insulation from some of the environment currently going on. Turning the page and looking at expenditures like Ethan outlined, the services we deliver are largely delivered by people, and so almost 50% of our finances are personnel related. That has also shifted a little bit, though. If you look back in 2015, it was 60%, so there is a larger concentration on contracts and the purchase of research materials and those types of things that do shift the pie a little bit compared to how it used to previously look. Here you have a look at our historical expenditures by program classification. There's a couple of items here, line items I'd like to point out. The first is research. I don't think the growth there that you see from 2021 to 2025 is probably much of a surprise. That's the story that you would expect to see from Wichita State. Towards the bottom, scholarships and fellowships, just like Ethan outlined, the change from 2024 to 2025 really isn't a change in the sense of the scholarships that the university is offering, but instead a change in the accounting standard that we've all adopted, which shifts essentially the need-based aid to students from the expense side and is now reflected as a discount to tuition on the revenue side. And then finally, as you look at student services, you see a little bit of maybe a little bit more than a little increase between 2024 and 2025. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in some later slides, but that's reflective of some of the investments that we've had to make into athletics over the last couple of years. President Muma often talks about one of our key goals at the university being affordability and accessibility. And I think this slide is a great representation of that. As you look at a comparison to all the research institutions in the Midwest, Wichita State is currently reflected as the lowest cost option. And then as you compare WSU to our peer institutions, again, you see WSU as the lowest cost option to our peers. Here you have an outline comparison of fall both headcount. The line at the very top represents total headcount, and then the bar graphs represent FTE count per the KBOR standard. And in both of those, you see growth, which we're very happy to see. But over to the right, you can see where some of our strengths have been related to resident, non-resident students, and then the declines we've experienced related to international students. Just a little bit different flavor here, but you have an outline by fiscal year of total credit hour production. And you can see in fiscal year 25, we did have a slight decline from fiscal year 2024. Again, that was driven by international credit hours and the decline we experienced that year. On this next slide, I know there is a ton of information here, but I think it's important to outline that the Shocker City and Shocker Select discount programs are really an integral part of our strategic enrollment model that we have in place. And it's easy to see why, right? The state of Kansas population is 2.9 million. And the Shocker City program opens up a population of almost 43.8 million to our resident rates. And towards the right, you have a graph that outlines, the headcount impact that we've experienced from that program. Similar to the slide that Ethan outlined, this presents for you over a long period of time the change between tuition revenue and state general fund appropriations. And the story this tells, to me at least, is what is the point in time in which students started to shoulder a larger portion of their overall educational costs. And for us, that occurred in 2011, 2012. I think that's very similar to the slides that you'll see for KU and K-State. But I think there is also a positive here in this slide. You know, if you look at the time between kind of 2012 to 2021, that gap and that spread was growing. Whereas you look at the more recent 4 or 5 years, that gap has stayed relatively stable. I wouldn't say it's necessarily contracting anymore, but it has stayed stable. Here you have an outline of our historical debt and our funding sources. For fiscal year 26, our total debt is $235.9 million. That increase from 2025 to 2026 is largely driven by the State Aviation Jobs Loan Program that you approved during a special session back in October. And we do have a pending debt issuance that's before the board today. And so I do want to just outline for you that's in relation to the University Stadium and moving forward with the final phase of that project. Phase 1A, which is the east side of the stadium, is complete. Phase 1B is currently in progress. We're waiting to lay the track field around that, and then we will be very close to being finished with that phase. And then in the summer, we will be ready to kick off phase 2, which is the portion of the stadium you see in the red. The overall project for total cost of the project for phase 2 is $46.4 million. And the funding is largely driven by the Board of Trustees. They will be servicing that debt and then also offset a smaller amount through some local partnerships with USD 259, who will be utilizing the stadium, as well as donations. Our CFI from 2024 to 2025, we did have a little bit of an increase from 3.22 to a relatively healthy 3.81. As you look at our reserve ratios, our primary reserve ratio remains within an acceptable range, but our viability ratio is the place in which we've had some challenges. And that goes to some of the liquidity challenges that we've had at the university. And I want to talk to that in a little bit more detail, if you will, on the next slide, which in relation to liquidity, I think this tells a better story as to that position within each of our institutions. And I think it's something that Jim McMurray is also going to be visiting with you later on today. But a common measure that's used by Moody's as our rating agency is days of cash. And that's a pretty simple, you're all business individuals, you know, it's a simple notion of if you weren't to bring in any additional revenue, how many days could you survive based on your current operations? And so as you look at this outline, in 2023, we were at 44 days of cash. We declined in 2024. And then when I came in at the university in this position in November, the estimate that we provided to Moody's when we had our ratings call last year was 21.3 days. That's pretty low. And so we've been laser focused on improving this. At the end of 2025, we were able to beat that estimate. And so we ended 2025 at 33.3 days. And then looking at the estimate that we'll be providing Moody's when we do our ratings call here in March 24th, I believe, the estimate that we'll be providing them is 65.3 days. Now, that's a combination of two things. And I want to be clear about this. I want to be clear about this with the rating agency as well, because the second item, I'm not exactly sure how they are going to view it. But the first item is we have improved our lab operations within IDP and IR. Some of those startup costs, we've weathered that, those issues of getting through those startup costs. and the cash drain that that partially caused. And so from the end of fiscal year 25 to the end of February, that cash position improved by $41.5 million. And we've put in a lot of work in order to get there. The second item is the State Aviation Jobs Loan Program. We are holding that in order to improve our liquidity position. That was a recommendation from Moody's last year when we had our review that we might want to look at a line of credit. The opportunity that the state presented by adopting that program was something that we viewed as an opportunity to jump on. But like I outlined, I don't know exactly how the Moody's analysts are going to review that. So if you were to back out that liquidity that we've gained through that loan program, we would be at 53.5 days. And I think we're still telling a very good story about where we're headed. We still have a lot of work to do, but I think we're headed in the right direction. Moving on to the next slide, just again, the significant capital projects that we have going on campus. Our campus has really changed the last 10 years. Some of you may have been at the opening for the Hammer building back in the summer. All the final touches are occurring on that now, and we're getting very close to closing that project out. The University Stadium already spoke about that, but that's moving forward. And then the partnership with KUMC for the Biomedical Center, that substantial completion of that project is intended for December of this year. And that is going to be an amazing facility. I had an opportunity to tour it just a few weeks ago, now that the sheetrock and walls are up. And I think it's really going to be transformational for both KUMC and WSU. And it's going to be a great partnership for us going forward. Looking forward, some strengths and opportunities for the university. Our applied learning program is a real anchor for our institution, especially in relation to our first generation students. And last year, students earned $39.2 million through those partnerships. So for those first generation students and their parents, not only can those students come to Wichita State and get an education, but we can also help them get experience within the field that they're looking at enrolling in. Research growth, we already talked about that a little bit. Expect here our estimate for fiscal year 25 that was submitted to HERD was $475 million. And then the biomedical campus, we already spoke about that. So for challenges related to the university, you may know, I suspect you already know that on our campus, we've already announced for our budget planning a 7% budget reduction. We did that back in December, and that's driven by a variety of different items that you see here outlined there. One of the reasons that we were so proactive is because of our liquidity challenges. Because of that, we do have to be a little bit more proactive in trying to know that we can't draw down our cash balances if we run into a budgetary issue. And so some of the challenges that we see as we prepare that budget, inflationary impacts, just looking at software leases, your traditional things, utilities, our projections is that would total $2.3 million in next year's budget. State funding, we did already plan for a 3% potential state budget reduction. That would be $3 million for Wichita State. We do anticipate continued declines in international enrollment. I saw some very concerning information from our International Graduate School office just the other day. And in our projections right now, last year's impact was $5.7 million. For 2027, we expect that impact to be $2.7 million. And then finally, Division I athletics. And this is a place in which I want to concentrate just a little bit on, because when you look at WSU versus KU or K-State, I think our programs are really night and day, and our stories are a little bit different as well. WSU does not have football, and so we do not have, in the sense of dollars that are shared through our conference, Traditionally, the football programs have some richer revenues that come in from cable TV and those types of things. WSU doesn't receive that type of revenue related to the football programs from our conference because we don't have a football program. And the other dynamics I think that go into it is because just to back up here a little bit and go back to some of our experiences. After COVID hit, WSU athletic program made the choice to draw down our cash balances as we weathered that storm. And as we came out of COVID at the same time, our basketball program wasn't performing as well, and we started to experience attendance issues. And as we got into last fiscal year, 2025, we knew that we would have operating deficits within our athletics department. And that's even before the House and the NCAA settlement occurred. And with that challenge, we knew that last year we had to put additional revenues into athletics. We budgeted for that in fiscal year 2026. And we anticipate in 2027 that we will have to put an additional $1 million into athletics to shore up the entire operating deficit that we've been working through. Does the House versus NCAA make this whole issue easier? No, it does not. But I would also say in the sense of revenue sharing, because we don't have football, that is also a little bit of a financial benefit for us because the revenue sharing is often weighted more towards the football programs than the basketball programs from what we've seen so far. The other thing that I think is important to outline for Wichita State is if you go back over the last 2 decades, the university has always contributed tuition revenue to our athletic department. That has been a consistent standard for us going back more than 20 years. And so working through these operating deficits isn't a place where we want to be, but it's where we are. Final thoughts, just a few things that keep me up at night. And that is just, sustaining our research growth and enrollment growth with a shrinking staff support because of the budget cuts that we've been addressing, and how we continue to work through the challenging employee compensation settings that all of our institutions are working through. And just at the bottom, I know this is a similar story for all of the institutions, but if you go back to fiscal year 2017, the university has implemented about $34 million in budget reallocations and reductions over that time frame. Our SGF and tuition funded positions are 199 FTEs less than they were back in fiscal year 2017. I'd be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. Last.
Regent Dicus, in my defense, I think I lost 10 minutes to questions when I was up there for 30. I just wanted to get that on the record.
I'm buying Ethan a watch just for the record, so. Unless I blow it, then I won't do that, but. So I'll wait for this to come up.
Oh, now we got challenge here.
Yeah, I'll try to make up for my colleague over here, so.
The first one always gets all the questions.
And as David and Ethan both said, there's a lot of the same issues on all the campuses in terms of challenges, and I'll walk through this relatively quickly and show you show what that look. Is that fully loaded, Elaine?
There is a delay.
Okay.
It seems glitchy. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through our organizational structure, mid-year updates, enrollment, tuition fee pair comparisons, our gen use update, our operating expenditures, debt service and CFI, and our fiscal challenges, similar to what my colleagues have done. To go in there?
There we go.
Okay. So in terms of our structure and from one of the part of our 1KU organization, I am now the CFO of both the Lawrence and Edwards and the Medical Center. David Ranikar is the COO, Chief Operating Officer of those 2 areas. And there's been lots of other organizational changes. But everything on that chart from a CFO perspective, I am responsible for. We really have two agencies, the Lawrence Edwards campus, the Medical Center campus. And then we have 5 controlled affiliates under that, the Center for Research, Memorial Union, Kansas Athletics, and the Medical Center has a research institution and a student union. And all of these are being collaborated together and combined together in the one KU organizational structure that we've had in place about 15 months. Our non-controlled affiliates is a KU endowment, the health system that we're very, very tight in with a partnership with, and the University of Kansas Physicians. Here's mid-year updates. We have our 3rd largest freshman class in history. We peaked a year ago, and then we've dropped off a little bit, and we hope to be able to maintain what happened this year, and I'll show you that in a minute. And total university enrollment, because we've been rolling off those smaller classes, is the largest in history. That impacts both revenues and expenditures. You need more advisors, you need more facilities, you need more housing, but you're also bringing in more revenue, and that has a push and pull on it. We're developing strategies to manage future impact of the enrollment cliff, whether it's online master's programs or competency-based education. There's a whole effort going on that to manage what is definitely coming, particularly out-of-state students are getting harder and harder to get as other universities try to compete for that through scholarships and everything else. We're transitioning to a one KU operation and management structure. As I mentioned a minute ago, I've integrated the KU Medical Center finance staff and the KU staff. We're going through a reorganization, efficiency review, AI integration review, systems integrations, all those things are going on between the two campuses, which have really operated independently for 100 years probably, and bringing them together has lots and lots of benefits. We have a new provost and executive vice chancellor, Arash Mafi. He'll be introduced today. And so we're beginning to work with him. He started a week and a half ago. Research remains very strong, but there's uncertainty in federal research funding. We're seeing on the NIH side in particular, which is the medical center, they have a bigger budget than last year, but they're issuing no grants and none of the money's getting distributed because Office of Management Budget is not pushing it through. So we have more money, but there's nothing flowing through right now. We expect that bottleneck to get fixed. But that is a challenge is, when is the money going to flow and how's it going to flow given all the issues that are going on with the federal government? And where federal research is going is a thing that we're looking at on both campuses, particularly the medical center and NIH. We continue to identify and move faculty and staff to market pay. We have done a compensation study on both campuses. We know what the gap is. We know where the gap is. And we started addressing that significantly this year. And it resulted in the contract that just recently got signed in the impact we had on staff. We've been moving the lowest paid people to market or to a minimum salary. We did a big effort on that. Some of the minimum paid employees maybe saw a double-digit increase just recently on both staff and faculty, and we're going to keep moving people to get them to the right place. We're peer benchmarking to our AAU peers, other universities and top research universities, and we're trying to get people between the 25th and 70th percentile of our peers. So we know what we need to get people, and it's the effort of doing that over time, particularly given that 10 years earlier, for several years, there were no pay increases at all. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we're operating in the first year of revenue sharing, as my colleagues mentioned, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute and the things we've been doing on that. We're in phase 2 of the Gateway Project, which is funded by, phase 2 is funded by donors, by economic development tools from the city, CID, Star Bonds, and TIF, and developer contributions. Phase 1 was funded by donors, state funding, and athletic bond finance that is paid for by revenues generated by the stadium. As the stadium opens up fully, that brings more and more money into athletics. So we're in that period between getting it going and getting it fully generating the revenue that it will. We got a new cancer center that's going up very, very rapidly, be opening in December 2027. We're going to be working with my colleague behind me, Mr. McMurray, on issuing $100 million in bonds in the coming months for that. And so that is going in the new Wichita campus that we're doing with my partner over here is going up, and we'll be opening that up soon. So that is state funded there. So those are the big things. Lots of construction going on campus. Next slide. So this is an indication of our largest freshman class was in fall of, our third largest class was in fall of 25. So you can see the big jump up the last 3 years. That is a very deliberate, very specific strategic enrollment management effort. But you can see the out-of-state dropped a little bit in 2025. So that is where the challenges are at, is getting that going up while everybody's competing for the smaller pool of graduates.
A quick question on the mid-year updates, Jeff.
Yep.
Specifically for KU, are you having any activities pertaining to World Cup?
Yes, we're going to be a host city. We're going to be
Yes.
one of the.
And you're right in the heart of.
We are. Yes, we have, our housing is being deployed to help out. So for the summer, our student housing is going to be available because all the hotel rooms are going to be taken up. So particularly if parents want to visit, there's no place to stay.
Right.
So we got to accommodate the ability to keep operations going while all the hotels are taken up by World Cup. Yeah, we have a committee. I have one of my key staff members on that. University has tons of people on a committee with the city of Lawrence.
Yeah.
Rock Chalk Park is being used, which has a soccer field.
Do we
We're going to be a
see-
host city for one of the cities, one of the teams. So yeah,
Do
we're,
we see any uptick in the revenue
hope
because
so.
of that? Good.
I'm hoping so.
All right.
Yes. We'll see how that all works out. Cost versus revenue, right? What's that?
Right, exactly. Yeah. If you play it right, we should be making.
Yes, there should be. So again, this is just showing we're the third largest class, but a drop off in out-of-state students. So our strategies are now, how do you attract those out-of-state students relative to everybody else who's going after those? And obviously a drop in international. You can't really see it because it's relatively small, but there's a drop off there too. And then university-wide, because of those 3 years of record freshman classes, and then, graduate student recruitments and things like that's been going on. We have the largest student FTE on record. Again, that brings in more revenue, but on the same time, you have to provide more services. So it's a double-edged sword there in terms of the cost of doing it, particularly student housing is continuing to be a challenge for us. And we've bought some buildings and we're going to need to build more for that. And we have buildings that are coming offline as they get aged out. Student credit hour production's up, as you can see, similarly, and that does help for some things you're going to see here in a minute. So that is there. And then this is a chart that both my colleagues showed you, which is, I think, affectionately called the scissor chart because it shows in the same year, 2010, 2011, where the student burden got higher than the state burden in terms of what the revenue coming in. And you can see we've been relatively flat on students for the last several years, but state enrollment has dropped and been flat. And that is a challenge as inflation happens and your expenses go up. You're trying to get people to market pay because there's a gap there. Those are two sources with state funding really not keeping up with inflation historically. This is our peer set, and this is Regent Dykes' favorite slide because his daughter went to Virginia, although that's past him now, and you can see the cost differences between the two. Sorry. Yeah. It could have went to KU, but I get it. I have a kid that would.
My daughter went to DC. I can feel the pain.
So this shows you that we've maintained that same spot for several years, and our goal is to stay in that tier. And when we do consider tuition increases, that we remain competitive with our peers because we're competing for their students that are in state as well as them competing for ours. So this is an important chart for us when we're considering our tuition strategies. This is our general use budget, similar to what others have shown in terms of revenues. This is exactly where we expect it to be in terms of the categories, around half. So there's no surprises in there from my perspective of looking at that relative to history, that we are maintaining what we expect to spend on this time. When you see the medical center one, which is the next one, you're like, well, why are you in the 30% range? The really reason for that is the cancer center is a big number. And they have all these other funding sources that they have to spend first. They spend state money last. So they'll catch up here real quickly, and that will be on track where we expect as well. And then our consolidated budget, this shows you where we have been historically in terms of these functional classifications. And not unlike my colleagues, institutional support has been growing mainly because of cybersecurity costs, software licensing costs, and other IT related costs that are driving that up, as well as more support for enrollment management and things like that you need when you're having enrollment growth like we've had. And you can see research growing substantially over that period of time as well. And in there, that I do want to make a point because there has been information that is not factual. There's pay in there. And over from 22 to 25 to the current year, we've given everybody that's a permanent employee 10.5% increase in pay. The compensation on the Lawrence campus between 22 to 25 is 27% higher. So we've been putting money into cost of living. We've been putting money into retention. We've been putting money into other areas, growing staff where we had to support these services and bring the faculty in. So we have put a lot of effort into compensation that if you were looking at a different chart, in page 82 of our annual finance report, you can see that by pay and compensation, not just these categories. So some of that growth you're seeing is pay. And going to Regent Dykes's question he asked Ethan is, is that sustainable? Well, we have to figure out a way to get all of our employees to market. And we have about a $30 million gap on both campuses, annual gap. And then we have to keep up with inflation while you're fixing the gap. So we have to find a way to grow that because market pay is really, really critical to maintaining the quality and the standards and the instruction and the research that we need to do. And we're also bringing online a cancer center at Wichita campus that, we're going to have to operate and run those. So we're going to have to find ways, and we have strategies in place besides tuition and state funding that are going to have to do that. And on the research side, the really big one is growing the clinical side. And we've had tons of meetings. We had a meeting 7 a.m. yesterday morning with the leadership of the medical center to talk about clinical growth can generate 30% margins. So you can get a pretty big margin when you have partnerships on the clinical side. And that's one of the areas of strategies we have, and growing research that brings a return on it. And so the research side, it's almost a third of the revenue at the medical center. That is a really heavy focus on the medical center campus. On the Lawrence campus, it's competency-based education, online learning. And we also, in this area, we have to invest in AI, because I know you're going to probably ask me a question about that. And we have a just this year, an initiative to put $5 million into high-speed computing. And we're going to have to put more than that. We're redoing our whole on-campus high-speed computing infrastructure that will be used on both campuses, because that's really important in clinical and research. So we're really putting a heavy emphasis in AI, investing in the infrastructure for that as well. So we're dealing with pay, we're dealing with investing in technology, particularly AI type of technology, and then our buildings and our research labs and our infrastructure. So all those are
Our own data center.
we do. And that's really important for some of the confidentiality of,
Absolutely.
you can't stick it in the cloud because you
Depends
can,
on
but
how you protect
yeah,
it.
you can, but yes.
You can, but
Yeah, but
better this way,
Yeah.
based on how much data we use.
yeah, exactly. And we have huge amounts of data for the medical school on that side. So we need that. This shows you where we are in terms of our revenues and expenses. And it shows you on the left-hand side where the revenue comes from, 17% from the state. The bright blue is the tuition and fees. And you can see, and this gets back to, how are you going to deal with getting to market pay when 65% of your expenses are people? So that is the area we need to grow or reallocate. And just recently, we put $14 million into the pay packages between faculty and staff just this year. And we did it through reallocating. You won't see our expenses go down, but you'll see our expenses move from one area into pay. So you're going to see it's a reallocation that's going on. And not unlike Ethan just talked about, we're going to have to figure out how to reallocate our resources to get market pay up, to get those investments in that technology.
Right.
So it's really looking at your pie and how are you going to shift it to do that and grow it where you can and if you can. So this just shows you where we spend our money and where we get our money from. And you can see contracts, grants and contracts are a big portion. They're a third of the revenue at the medical center. So those are categories.
What comes under auxiliary enterprises?
That would be athletics and unions and things like that. So that's where that's going to show. And housing and things like that show up there. So not research, not teaching and instruction.
Right. But you have a good mix on your pie.
We do, and that's one of the helps of our
Really
credit.
good.
We have a very diverse revenue mix, and that is a credit strength.
So you're not putting most of your eggs in one basket and then
No.
risking.
Right. It's a diverse revenue source, and we need to make it even more diverse. And particularly that research pie needs to get stronger,
Mhm.
and we're putting a lot of effort into that. One of the things that has happened over the last 5 years, and by the way, I came here 5 years ago on Monday, and my third day, I had to do this presentation. I just been here 2 days, so this is my fifth one now. But you can look back at the 5 year period, and you can see we've been aggressively retiring our debt, and that our debt burden is now, at that pretty low number at 3.5%. And you'll also see that we're going to be issuing 100 million for the Cancer Center. We're getting a request for 60 million for School of Architecture. We're doing 35 million for student housing, but we're retiring debt at the same time. When this stabilizes at 2027, we'll be at 4.5%. Our cap is 7%. So we have capacity to do more infrastructure. So paying down debt, keeping our debt burden reasonable. And the other one that is not on here, but I'll talk about for a second, we've also significantly improved our days of cash. We're at 193 days as of the end of fiscal year 2025. So we've grown that substantially. So, if you go back, and I had this discussion with Hunter, who gave you the presentation on CFI last month. I had a conversation with him yesterday evening about, where we are financially versus where we were 10 years ago. We are at the strongest position we've ever been. But the challenges are so large. We're in a good place to start, but are we good enough to start given the challenges we have? We have more days of cash. We have our reserves are well, our net position is strong. When I walked in here 5 years ago, we had a $50 million structural deficit on, negative margin on the general fund. We broke even in 2025. Breaking even is not good enough to get pay though. You gotta get positive, right? So we have significantly improved in every category. If you were to take a 10-year ago financial statement they're online and look at today's, everything's a lot better. But the challenges are higher ed everywhere. All of us is at an existential crossroads. Federal support, state support, enrollment cliff, all these factors are huge challenges for all of us. And you can see our CFI, and you can see the trend there, how that's went in the last several years. And 2024, that was the big ARPA. 21 and 24 was kind of the ARPA remnants, or really, really good returns on the stock market. Those peaks, you gotta factor that out. But we have been steadily increasing. We're in a really good place in terms of our CFI score. Thank goodness we are, because the challenges are immense that we're facing going forward. And that is, what you have to convince people. If you're doing so well, why can't you do more on pay? Why can't you do more on facilities? Well, we have to manage that so we don't get ourselves in trouble. And these challenges are here: flat or declining state support, the uncertainty of federal funding. Right now, NIH has more money than they had the year before, but it's not being distributed. So how do you got to cash flow your way through while you wait for their money to catch up? And what are they going to do in terms of their facilities and administration distributions that have been threatened? What's going to happen with that? Enrollment challenges and changing how you look at enrollment and competing, particularly for us in that out-of-state market. Facility upgrades, maintenance of new facilities. We've got a lot of new facilities coming online at the medical center, which are putting fiscal pressure on to have margins to open those up. You got to open a cancer center up. It's $1.5 million startup package for every research you bring online in a new building. And so you have to deal with that. Cybersecurity threats, rapidly changing IT environment, including investing in AI, the infrastructure side of that, not to mention all the other expertise you need to bring in there. And then NCA versus a House settlement. And, there was an article published in the Wire that you all probably saw about that we were using state funding to fund athletics. That is absolutely not true. What we have done, not dissimilar to what Ethan was talking about, and we had this discussion with all the big 12 CFOs recently. We were on a call. We were both on there. How are you dealing with athletics? And everybody's like, we're all kind of maybe break even. We're probably the last two schools that athletics was pumping money into the university historically. Arizona State's been putting $40 to $60 million a year into athletics for some time. And that it's common for our peers to have been subsidizing athletics. Where we are is we are scholarshiping the student athletes and we're helping with housing with the student athletes. So we're covering those expenses so that they can take their resources and deal with these challenges. I went through 18 months ago a very, very extensive review with athletics and Deloitte as a consultant to find efficiencies in athletics, and we cut about 12% out of their budget. And then as you're looking at it, if you want to play in the Power Four, you got to get close to that $20.5 million of revenue sharing. And then you got the NIL side, the sponsorship side on top of that. It's a new world that every CFO in the country is struggling with, is how do you continue to have an athletic program whenever they're going to be very difficult to self-sustain. And so that's where we are. We are scholarshiping, providing support to athletes just like we do our regular students. And that's how we're addressing it. So they can use their revenue to pay the athletes that they have to pay to keep going. And then obviously inflation over the last 5 years has been 18.9% on the HEPI, the higher education price index. And that is something you got to deal with. You got to deal with market pay. You got to get people where they need to be. You've got inflation and all these factors with state funding staying flat. And tuition is a relatively small piece of that pie, as you saw. And it doesn't cover everything. So you got to diversify your revenue. You got to think more like, nobody likes when you say this, more like a business. How do you create margin? How do you create margin that can support the academic and research and service mission? And that's the whole mindset that all of higher ed's going through right now. So that is into my presentation.
Any questions? Yes?
So what are the main risks that other than challenges that you talked about, huge risks that could hit us this very close to
I'm sorry,
home?
what was that?
Which among these challenges could be very close, very soon?
They feel like they're all very soon, but state funding is the most imminent one. We're watching that very closely. Our forecast is assuming we stay flat. That's probably the best case, as we've talked about in these board meetings. If there is a cut, then we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that, because again, we've gotten from really, really negative to break even with some margin, and we're doing pay. If suddenly we get knocked back underwater, that becomes difficult. And then in enrollment, our enrollment is the third highest and strong, but we expected that drop to happen next year, not this year. So the drop in enrollment we saw off the records, of course, came a year early, and early indications are we think we can hit that number again. But there's just so much uncertainty there. So I would say enrollment, and then, what's the future of college athletics and how are you going to support that? But the biggest one I'm worried about, because its impact on the medical center, is research. What's going to happen in terms of the federal government support of research? And we've gotten lots of positive indications from the budget that got approved, and from some indications about we're going to get a reasonable allocation in terms of F&A money. But research is the one that keeps me up at night when I'm at the medical center, and enrollment keeps me up at night when I'm at the Lawrence campus. So those are the two big ones.
Find somewhere else to sleep.
Good point.
Jeff, thank you very much. Jim McMurray, you ready?
Well, good afternoon.
They all
at
talked
this
about
point. So you're going to get the very short version of this. Realizing there's more to happen today. State University Credit Insights. I'm Jim McMurray with the Kansas Development and Finance Authority. I serve as the executive director. I've been with the authority for 20 years. We serve as the primary issuer for most state agencies and the state universities, not necessarily required to use us, but frequently are. We bring significant time, talent, and experience to tax compliance. The tax exempt taxable question, Ethan so eloquently handled earlier. Yeah. Disclosure, SEC, anti-fraud provisions, investment of bond proceeds when appropriate, and just someone that is there and at your side through the entire duration of the financing, not just at the execution phase and its entire life cycle, to, bring the outside professionals at a favorable terms and conditions for the transaction, but also realize their conduct during the transaction is geared towards that moment in time. And if you don't have someone that with the expertise during that moment that doesn't have the longer 10, 20, 30-year time horizons, there's going to be things that are done at the time of financing execution that won't necessarily be good for you 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So just every finance person has to do a market update, and it's going to go really quick. Of course, there continues to be a bunch of federal policy uncertainty and geopolitical events, generating a risk on, risk off cycle in the market. In times of uncertainty, liquidity becomes more valuable. Those that have it are in a better position to navigate, whereas those that don't have it can find themselves in delicate positions with limited and or expensive options to address the fiscal challenges. For the year, there are some headwinds carrying over from the trade war uncertainty, and now more recently a hot war in the Middle East, immigration restrictions and restoring the student loan payments. People, these people that were not having to make student loan payments are going to have to use their income to help start making those payments, what they haven't had to do for several years. There are a number of tailwinds. The CapEx from AI and data center spending is going to be very large in the context of our GDP, around $650 billion. The one big beautiful bill will provide some fiscal stimulus, and that tax refunds will be larger. And then the dollar depreciation that we're seeing, at least in the short term, makes importing costs lower. Last year, I spoke to you in April. We had some more data points since our transactions that happened last year happened actually before I spoke to you. It's a flip side this year. We have 3 upcoming transactions in successive weeks. So we have several rating calls and a rating visit to K-State schedule. And then we have these financings that will close mid-April to well, those are the pricing dates. The closing dates are two weeks after that, but ranging from mid-April to late April, we're going to have these 3 research institutions have financings.
Jim, question on that, with the challenges that we've heard over the last 2 months from each of the universities, is there any concern that you will be able to raise all this money in the debt market?
No, these are higher spectrum credits. The municipal market's been seeing inflows year to date. So there's still a robust market. For example, the University of Connecticut priced yesterday around a $400 million deal. Seeing weekly volume in the billions of dollars just in the higher education market. So nothing, currently observed. Now, if oil goes up to, a lot higher, and the prospects of war escalate, it's going to be a series of risk on or risk off rather than kind of this flip flop, hey, this event leads us to believe it's going to be a little less riskier than we thought yesterday. But if we get into successive, hey, there's more and more risk, and then it's going to get priced in the market. Fortunately, you're at the higher end of the credit spectrum, so it doesn't impact you nearly as much as if you're lower in the credit. Notably, U.S. Treasuries, they actually had a nice rally from, during February, and unfortunately, we've retraced that here through the first half of March. Building on last year's discussion, next slide, thank you. We requested or suggested that the universities, previously, this was already completed, that you get these 3 metrics in any kind of request for debt authorization. It gives you a more holistic picture of where beyond just the subject matter at hand or the financing in hand. That's being done. That's excellent. And then the first graph I'll show you next is regarding margin for the universities. Just some narrative there from Moody's on what the importance is. Of course, you have to generate margin. Where you're a nonprofit, you're governmental, but you still have to generate margin to either do strategic new initiatives, take advantage of market opportunities, or just renew your fiscal plan. And then skipping ahead, since we're doing the short version here, historical earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization margins for the 6 institutions. Moody's publishes a meeting report every year in the 2024 edition, which covers 187 public higher education institutions. The median EBITDA is around 10.7%. That's the solid, the dotted black line on the line graph there. You can see where all the 6 institutions fall out on that line graph. So some opportunities for improvements. If you're sub 7-8% over a sustained period, it's going to probably going to get evaluated in terms of a credit dimension. You can see none of the institutions have been below that threshold on a sustained basis. There's understanding there'll be some variations along that line, but if you're below that on a sustained basis, you're probably going to see some credit impacts. Next slide, please. Margin isn't the only thing you need. You also need liquidity. We made a suggestion last year, and we reiterate this suggestion this year. While you do have a policy on liquidity, and then I quote that in the second paragraph, it doesn't have a lot of teeth in it, quite honestly. Some of the institutions have their own policy that they've been using, and that's good. But I think as we look at the next line graph, I think as your supervisory responsibility probably dictates, they need to put more teeth in your policy. And while the CFI index does include that, and you've got that data point last year, month, it doesn't, since it's a composite index, it doesn't necessarily reveal, unless you dig down on it, this particular vulnerability. So days cash on hand is the most common measure. You've already heard that used by Jeff on their policy. So moving on to the line graph, mostly a good story. And then David's already identified with WSU their plan to move forward, but it is an important thing that they are able to plan for and address and actually perform on improving liquidity. Next slide, please. And just some of the highlights for each of the 6 institutions. Highlights are in green on the positive side, and then we just had a call with Pittsburgh State University and Moody's last week, and then 3 upcoming associated with the transactions we're doing. So mostly a positive story. One area just kind of need to keep your eye on the ball. That's it.
Any question? Jim, thank you. Appreciate that update there. Next item we have is a review of the board agenda, which we had our agenda call. We'll just go with that as a review of the board agenda, since everything is under the consent agenda for fiscal affairs this month. The appropriations request. Elaine, you have anything? Got nothing going on in that regard yet? Chad, anything on the Campus Restoration Act that?
Not substantive.
And last, audit funding?
I would just mention, we are still awaiting the state single audit for administration of financial federal aid. And we are reviewing the coordinated institutions audits. We are still awaiting 3 community college findings or audits from fiscal year 2025. And we will present those findings to you at our next in-person meeting with a summary and identifying the findings for those schools.
With that, we have our future committee meetings, a little longer one, maybe on our agenda call on the 31st this month, since we do not have a fiscal affairs and audit committee meeting in April, since we will be on a campus visit. Yeah, and then we will be back to our normal agenda call and meeting in May. So from that, any
I was just gonna
You're-
move
you're
we
the-
adjourn.
Yeah, anybody else got anything they want to add? Yeah, we'll take that motion to adjourn.
I'll
Second,
second.
got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.